I'm Jerry Conrad. I came to Roanoke on June the 1st, 1968. I remember it well because it was my daughter Sydney's 4th birthday. I came from Lincolnton, North Carolina, where I was vice president of advertising at the Burris Chair Company, which made a line of recliners as well as other furniture. I was hired by Claude Harrison to handle the Johnson Furniture Company account, which was later acquired by Singer Furniture. They wanted someone with experience in furniture advertising to handle their account, and in addition to my time at Burris, I had years earlier worked as an account representative at Alderman Studios in High Point, North Carolina, which specialized in furniture photography. While there, I was also the student representative to major advertising agencies in New York, Chicago, and Atlanta, where I became enamored with the ad agency business. I thought then, gee, that's for me. That's something I'd like to do. So I left after 5 years at Alderman to join my first advertising agency, which was Hagee Middleton Neal, based in North Carolina, in Greensboro, North Carolina. After a couple years there, I was recruited by consumer and marketing advertising in Atlanta, Georgia, where I later became senior vice president of account services. After 5 years there, I left to go on the manufacturer side, the client side, and joined Burris. And that's about the pause that I'll take. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Tell me when we're ready.
Okay, we're ready.
At Claude Harrison, we later picked up another furniture manufacturer, which was Bassett Mirror Company in Bassett, Virginia. While there, I also worked on the Roanoke Gas account, Wendy's, Colonial American Bank for a while Claude was out sick for about a month or so. And last but certainly not least, on the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Southwestern Virginia account, the success of which had a huge bearing on the rest of my advertising career. In 1982, Claude Harrison Company merged with Houck Advertising to become Houck and Harrison, which later reverted back to Houck Advertising after Claude died in 1983. The move happened while I was on Christmas vacation and really actually caught me totally by surprise. At first I was very disappointed because I had hoped to buy the agency when Claude decided to retire. But in the long run, the merger turned out to be a very good one, and I certainly enjoyed my time at Houck, both in Roanoke and later in Cleveland, Ohio, when we opened an office there. In the spring of 1983, the Virginia legislation passed enabling legislation that actually removed the restrictions on the operating boundaries between the two Blue Cross Shield plans in the state of Virginia. Ours in Roanoke, which was Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Southwest Virginia, which is based in Roanoke, and the much larger Blue Cross Blue Shield plan of Virginia, which was based in Richmond. We had, up until then, the operating districts between the plans was restricted. The Roanoke plan was limited to 27 counties, which were mostly rural, and the Richmond plan to, let's just do that paragraph again. Okay. In the spring of 1983, the Virginia's legislation passed enabling legislation that removed the operating restrictions on the boundaries at which the two plans could operate. The Blue Cross plan of Southwestern Virginia, which was based in Roanoke, and the much larger plan based in Richmond. Our plan had particularly then been restricted to 27 mostly rural counties and the Richmond plan to 68 of the most populous counties in the state. Now the state was open to competition between the two plans. The first again, please. When you're ready. The first phase of our statewide campaign was a simple I've got the type is wrong, but let's start again. Okay. The first phase of our statewide campaign was a simple 1982 rates guaranteed campaign, which promised current rates for the next year if groups signed up by March 15th. We ran full-page newspaper ads with coupons, a 10-second TV commercial, and travel time radio and outdoor boards, as well as a direct marketing push. The newspaper ads featured an 800 number, which created such response that the client had to add 10 additional operators to handle the load. An interesting note to the March 15th deadline and a list of headlines that we submitted to the client, Andy Mayo and Frank Taylor at Blue Cross. I had written a headline intended just to get a laugh. I knew we wouldn't run it. The headline was, Caesar didn't act before the Ides of March, and look what happened to him. To my great surprise, the client liked the headline, and we actually ran a full-page newspaper ad across the state. The 800 number worked so well that in the next phase we created a creative strategy that would position 1-800-BLUE as the number to call from anywhere in the state to reach Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Not the Richmond plan, not Roanoke, but Blue Cross and Blue Shield. We created a 30-second TV commercial and a series of 10s using the computer animation, which was then newly developed. We produced it at Image West Studios in Hollywood and reinforced it with radio commercials using the same soundtrack and a full-page news. Again, please. Okay. We created a 30-second TV commercial and a series of 10 spots using computer animation, which was just then newly developed. We produced it at Image West Studios in Hollywood and reinforced it with radio commercials using the TV soundtrack and a full-page two-color blue newspaper ad. The campaign ran statewide, and the TV spots won the that year's Monitor Award for the Best Director and Best Editor. Okay. The campaign helped the Roanoke plan achieve a 132% underwriting increase in the first year and made them the fastest growing plan in the nation, in the whole country. It was also responsible for Halkin Harrison winning the Gold Effie Award for the best regional financial advertising campaign of the year, awarded by the New York Marketing Association, or the, let's do that again. Okay. The campaign helped the Roanoke plan achieve a 132% underwriting increase the first year and made them the fastest growing plan in the nation. It was also responsible for Halkin Harrison winning the Gold Effie for the best regional financial advertising campaign of the year, and it was awarded by the New York chapter of the American Marketing Association in New York City. We, along with Roy Batista, who was president of the Roanoke Plan, and his wife Andy, and his wife, again, please. Okay. It was also responsible for Halcon Harrison winning the Gold Effie for the best regional financial advertising campaign of the year, awarded by the American Marketing Association chapter in New York City. We, along with Roy Batista, who was president of the Blue Cross Plan of Southwest Virginia, and his wife, along with Andy Mayo, who was in charge of advertising at the plan, and his wife, and me and my wife Peggy, flew to New York to attend the dinner banquet awards. Bob Stone, who was the editor of a column in Ad Age, said it was the most unusual campaign that he had come across in his 35 years in the business, and he included a description of the campaign in his book, Successful Telemarketing. The success of the campaign also came to the attention of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Plan of Ohio, which was based in Cleveland, and who had recently merged with the plan in Toledo. The Ohio legislature had a bill pending that would allow the Ohio plan to negotiate with hospitals for the cost of their services, which up until then had been forbidden. They had to pay whatever the hospitals wanted to charge for their services, and it was costing the Cleveland plan over $300 million every year. Surveys showed that the plan, Bill, please. Surveys showed that there was an overwhelming opposition to passing the bill, and it was going to fail when it came to a meet, which was actually in a matter of a few weeks. I was at the October Furniture Market in High Point, North Carolina, handling media relations for our clients, Bassett and Singer, when I received a phone call from Jerry Rogers, who was the Senior Vice President of the Cleveland Plan. He wanted to know if we could help him get the bill passed. I asked him if he could be at our office in Roanoke the next day, which was a Sunday, and that I would have a creative team there to see what we could do. He said that he could. They hired a private jet and met with us the next day. I was there along with Bill Houck Sr. and Bill Jr. and our creative team of Jim Wilson, and who was copy chief, and Chuck Rapetti, who was the art director. They were there with Jack Burry, who was president of the plan in Cleveland, Jerry Rogers, who was our senior VP, and Bill Silverman, who was president of their public relations agency, which handled the PR for the Cleveland plan. At that meeting, they outlined the programs or the problems involved with getting the bill passed and the ramifications of it if it failed to pass, which was the $30 million loss every year. We told them to go home, come back next Sunday, and we would present a plan. The next Sunday, the same group came back to Roanoke, and we presented 4 different themes and 3 different TV commercials for each theme. They picked 6 of the different TV commercials, all based on the premise that the existing bill was very unfair. We then went to studios in Chicago, Atlanta, and Nashville simultaneously to produce them, as time was of the essence and no one studio could produce all 6 in time. 34 days later, we were on the air throughout Ohio, and when the vote on the bill, which we were supposed to lose, came to account, the bill passed 92-5. But in spite of the success of our, Ken, please. But in spite of the success of the campaign for the Ohio plan, they were still represented by Fahlgren and Swink, a 313-man agency with multiple offices, of which 175 people were in their Cleveland office alone, and another advertising agency in Toledo, Ohio. We and all of the others said they really should consolidate everything in one agency, which we totally agreed with. Evidently, they also agreed, and in mid-December, they received presentations from 7 agencies, including the incumbents and us. A few days before Christmas, we received a very welcome early Christmas present. A phone call from Cleveland telling us that we had won a 2-year contract to be their one and only agency. In January of 1988, we began our planning for the Cleveland account, and it soon became apparent that we actually needed an office in Cleveland to adequately handle an account of this size. I was to be the senior vice president in charge of the satellite office, which it was 5 people, including an account representative, media planners and buyers. The creative work, art and copy, was still to be handled in Roanoke by Chuck Rapetti, and who was the art director, and Jim Wilson, along with mechanical artist and airbrush marvel Frank Peru, who came to Houck and Harrison, Claude Harrison, along with Isabel Thrasher, Jan Wilkins, and myself. So in March, we sold our house in Roanoke and bought a new house in Avon Lake, Ohio, and moved our offices to downtown Cleveland, 6 blocks from the Blue Cross offices. We remained in Cleveland until the end of the 2-year contract, which ended at the end of 1998. The plan had then made some changes in top management, who elected to spend their advertising budget in areas other than advertising. So we closed the Cleveland office, and I resigned from Houck effective December 31st. And on January 1st, 1990, I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee to accept a position as vice president of creative services at Cinetel Productions, who were then producing Dancing at the White Horse Cafe for the Nashville TV network, along with Hey Dude, a sitcom airing on the Nickelodeon cable campaign. Again, please. With that. I can take that whole paragraph if you will. Okay. We remained in Cleveland until the end of the 2-year contract, which ended at the end of 1998. The plan had then made some changes in top management, and they had elected.
You said 98, it was 88.
Oh, God, okay. Okay. We remained in Cleveland until the end of the 2-year contract, which ended at the end of.
Well, it's
What year was that?
89.
89. Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. We remained in Cleveland until the end of the 2-year contract, which ended at the end of 1989. The plan had made a couple changes in top management, and they had elected to spend their advertising budget in areas other than advertising. So we closed the Cleveland office, and I resigned from Houck Advertising effective December 31st of that year. On January the 1st of 1990, I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee to accept a position as Vice President of Creative Services at Cinetel Productions, who were then producing Dancing at the White Horse Cafe for the Nashville TV network, and Hey Dude, which was a sitcom airing on the Nickelodeon cable campaign. God darn it. Again, please. On the Nickelodeon cable network, damn it. Okay. We remained in Cleveland until the end of 1989. Is it? Is that right? Huh? Okay. Again, please. We remained in Cleveland until the end of 1989. The Cleveland plan had made some changes in top management, and they elected to spend their advertising budget in areas other than advertising. So we cleaved the. Damn, I don't know. I'm having trouble with this one. Okay, I'll do it this time. We remained in Cleveland until the end of the 2-year contract, which ended at the end of the year. That plan had made some changes in top management, and they elected to spend their advertising budget in areas other than advertising. So we closed the Cleveland office, and I resigned from Houck Advertising effective 30/19. Daggone it, I don't know. How did it sound up until then?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, we'll do it this time. We remained in Cleveland until the end of the year of the 2 contract, which ended in 1989. The Cleveland plant had made some changes in their top management, and they elected to spend their advertising budget in areas other than advertising. So we cleaved. God damn. Okay. Let me take a sip of water. Okay. We remained in Cleveland until the end of the 2-year contract, which ended December 1989. The plan had made some changes in top management, and they had elected to spend their advertising budget in areas other than advertising. So we closed the office in Cleveland, and I resigned from Houck Advertising effective December 31st of 1989. And on January the 1st of 1990, I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee to accept a position as Vice President of Creative Services at Cinetel Productions, who were then producing Dancing at the White Horse Cafe for the Nashville TV network and Hey Dude, which was a sitcom airing on the Nickelodeon cable network, and which was filmed on location in Tucson, Arizona. I stayed with Cinetel for about 5 years when it was acquired by Scripps Howard. They decided to locate their production facilities there, as well as the headquarters for the Food Network. I then went over to Roland Productions, which was also here in Knoxville, as a producer working on video productions for a large number of U.S. governmental agencies in Washington, which included the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Homeland Security, and the Center for Disease Control out of Atlanta, as well as videos on nuclear medicine scanners for the Siemens Company. I retired 6 years ago at age 80, and I'm living with my wife of over 40 years, Peggy, in Knoxville near my daughter Sydney and her husband Robin and my 10-year-old granddaughter, the love of my life.
You've been married over 50 years.
Among the highlights of my 22-year association, what?
You've been married for over 50 years, not 40 years.
Did I say 40?
Yeah, I'm 40.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I retired 6 years ago at age 80, and I'm living in Knoxville with my wife Peggy, and I'm near my daughter Sydney and her husband Robin of 10 years. God, again. I retired 6 years. I retired 6 years ago at age 80, and I'm living with my wife of over 40 years, Peggy, here in Knoxville.
50 years.
Did I say? What did I say?
40.
Why did I say 40? It says 50 on there. I retired 6 years ago at age 80, and I'm living in Knoxville with my wife of over 50 years, Peggy, and live near my daughter Sydney and her husband Robin and their 10-year-old. Okay. Again. I retired 6 years ago at age 80, and I'm living in Knoxville with my wife of over 50 years, Peggy, and I live near my daughter Sydney and her husband Robin and 10-year-old daughter, my granddaughter Lauren, which is love of my life. Among the highlights of my 22-year association with the Ad Federation of the Roanoke Valley, in addition to the many friends I made there, I would like to point to two highlights. The year 1977, when I had the honor of serving as president of the Ad Federation, and the previous year of 1976, when I received the Silver Medal Award. The award started off as I was standing in front of the stage at the Hotel Roanoke with my camera in hand, ready to photograph the winner for the newsletter advance, when the announcement was made as to the winner, which was chosen by, again, okay, again. Among the highlights of my 22-year association with the Ad Federation of the Roanoke Valley, in addition to the many, many friends I made there, I would like to point to two particular highlights. One was the year of 1977 when I had the honor of serving as president of the Ad Federation, and the previous year of 1976 when I was the recipient of the Silver Medal Award. It started off when I was standing in front of the stage at the Hotel Roanoke, camera in hand, ready to photograph the winner for the newsletter advance, when the announcement was made to the winner, which was chosen by votes from a secret committee, from nominations from the membership. Fellow member and photographer Bill Miner tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I need your camera." Simultaneously, I was called to the stage where they played a recording by Art Buchwald, the humorist who was then syndicated in over 500 newspapers worldwide and was a good friend of mine from my days in Paris as a freelance photojournalist, 1947, 1950. Art and I lived in the same Left Bank hotel, which was the Hotel des Etats-Unis, and we worked together on several stories when he wrote the Paris After Dark column for the Paris edition of the New York Times. His job there included restaurant reviews for his column, and it afforded his and me some very welcome meals at some of the finest restaurants that Paris offered. Art, I can't remember the actual address, but I could take you there. The recording turned out to be more than an announcement of the winner of the silver medal, which was typical humor. Buchwald, again, please. Okay. The recording turned out to be more of a roast than it was that I was the recipient of the silver medal. It was typical Buchwald humor, which I'll talk a little bit about later. After the announcement was made, my parents, who've been secretly brought up from Jacksonville, North Carolina. After the announcement was made, my parents, who had been secretly brought up from their home in Jacksonville, Florida, and my sister and brother-in-law from Wilmington, North Carolina, came into the room, and it made it a very emotional and very, very special event for me. I later found out that Art had planned to be personally at the event, but had to cancel due to a scheduling conflict, and that the contact with Art had been made by member Lelia Cox, who I worked with at Claude Harrison, and she was also a friend of Art, who had lived in Paris at the same time as Art and I did. I have a cassette recording of Art's message, the last lines of which were, "If you were determined to be an honest man, why did you ever go into advertising?" Typical Buckwall humor. I thoroughly enjoyed the 22 years I was in the Roanoke Valley Ad Federation and the competitive but very friendly relationships between all of the agencies. There were so many talented people that I worked with during the time that afforded whatever success I and the agencies I was working with at the time enjoyed, that I can't possibly pick out a favorite creative person. It's just impossible. It's a great honor to be included in this very ambitious, comprehensive product that the Roanoke Ad Federation is doing. It would be great if everyone involved could get together in Roanoke for the grand premiere. It would really be nice to see everybody again after all these years. I thoroughly enjoyed affiliation with the Roanoke Ad Federation and the many, many wonderful people that I worked with there. I look forward to seeing the finished product. Good luck and Godspeed. How'd it sound?
Sounded good.
Pardon?
It sounded great. Would you like to redo any paragraphs, or did you,
If we can, if I can hear it, yeah. Are you going to eliminate the off takes, or are you going to send them the whole file and let them do it?
I'll probably send them the whole file.
Good. Did it sound conversational or more like I was reading?
I think it sounded pretty conversational.
Did it?
One thing I might like to do is just ask you some of the questions, and then you just respond back to me. Just the questions that they've got on here.
Okay.
And just like a short, concise answer on.
Okay.
Just kind of a summary answer of, like, the first question is, tell us about your work in Roanoke, and then you can just
I've already
say-
done that, yeah.
Yeah, and just say, maybe 3 or 4 sentences, if you can.
That's where I'm going to have problems.
Okay, well, maybe, let's see. Maybe that one's you've pretty much covered. Let's just go to we're still rolling here, so I'll just go to the second question. I'm gonna step on this side of the camera,
Okay.
so you can just address towards me.
Still looking at the prompter, right?
You can look at me. I'll be right around here.
Okay.
In fact, I'll just move this chair so we can keep the same eye line here.
The reason I recorded it is because I have lapses of recall, so I don't think you're going to be able to use these, but we can do it.
Okay.
My synapses don't spark as close as they should.
Okay. Well, maybe since you just read through it, maybe it will maybe that'll give you an idea of how to answer it.
Okay.
We'll
try.
Okay. What was it like to work for Claude Harrison?
Oh, it was great. Claude was a great person to work with, and I enjoyed my time with him both there and for the short time he worked with me at. Let's do it again.
Okay. And try to restate the question in your answer.
Pardon me?
Try to restate the question in your answer because they won't hear my voice on the recording. So just like if I say, what was it like to work for Claude Harrison? You can say like, well, working for Claude Harrison was, you know, just to restate the question in your answer.
Okay.
You understand kind of what I'm saying there?
Well, I could start off with, I really enjoyed working with Claude Harrison. I don't need to repeat the question.
No,
Okay.
you don't have to, but just incorporate the question into the response.
All right, I'll give it to you in complete sentences.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, what was it like to work for Claude Harrison?
Working with Claude Harrison was a real pleasure. Claude was a great person that gave you an awful lot of latitude, and I really enjoyed my time working with him, both at Claude Harrison and Company, and later for the brief time he was with us at Houck and Harrison.
Okay. What did you think about the merger of Houck and Harrison, and what was the buzz around town?
When I got back from vacation, it was a Christmas vacation, I got the message from Claude that we were merging with Houck. Actually, I was very disappointed because I had intended or had hoped to purchase the agency when Claude decided to retire. As it turned out to be a very good merger, and I enjoyed my time at both agencies. And
Okay.
they'd have to cut that at the end because
You cut out the last
Yeah.
sentence. Okay. Tell me about the big win of the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Ohio. How important that was to the agency.
when it was announced that we had become the sole agency for the plan, when we received the announcement that we had won out over the 7 agencies who had competed for the Blue Cross and Blue Shield account of Cleveland, we were elated. It was just before Christmas of that year, and the announcement came as a very, very welcome early Christmas present.
Okay. And what was it like to pack up and move to Cleveland?
I didn't hear it.
What was it like to pack up and move to Cleveland?
Okay. When we decided to open an office in Cleveland, it necessitated my moving up there. I left Roanoke with a lot of feelings, but we enjoyed the time very much in Cleveland. We had moved into a nearby town of Avon Lake, which was about a 32-mile commute every day back and forth to. Let's do that again. Question.
Okay. What was it like to pack up and move to Cleveland?
When we decided to open the Cleveland office, I was appointed the vice president of creative services. No. When we won the account for the Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Cleveland, after competing with 7 other agencies to be their one and only agency, we decided to open an office in Cleveland because of the size of the account. It was, no, I don't like that. Let me think about it a minute. Okay.
Okay. What was it like to pack up and move to Cleveland?
When we decided an office to open, when we decided to open an office in Cleveland, we soon found out that an account of that size actually required an office in Cleveland to handle. It meant moving from Roanoke, where we had lived for 20 years, to a new location in Cleveland. It was an emotional move, But we enjoyed our time in Cleveland an awful lot. We were there for the next 2 years.
Okay. Who are the players in the advertising industry in Roanoke when you were
Ooh.
active there?
That's impossible.
Okay.
There's too many.
We'll just pass on that one. How did people in the advertising community get along?
One thing about working with the advertising community in Knoxville was that there was very, very friendly relationships between all of the agencies and all of the people. I worked with, particularly when I was president of the agency. No. Again,
Okay. How did people in the advertising community get along?
one nice thing about working in the business in Roanoke was the very warm relationships between all of the agencies and the people involved in them. I served for several years as head of the One of the nice things about the business in Roanoke was the very warm and cordial relationships between all of the agencies and all of the people involved. I was fortunate enough for several years to be editor of the Advance and just received all sorts of help from everyone, as well as the year we became president of the Ad Federation.
What was the most exciting business win you ever had? Business win you ever had?
I guess of all the accounts that we accumulated during the time I was there, that nothing exceeded the being awarded the account for the Cleveland Blue Cross and Blue Shield plan, because for that one we had competed with 7 agencies to become their one and only agency.
Okay, good. How did you feel about winning the silver medal, and what made it special for you?
I think I discussed that on that.
Yeah, we got a lot of that already.
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's.
let's just pass on that one. Who was the most talented person you worked with?
I'm not going to answer that.
Okay. And then they want to know about 3 people. Otto Whitaker.
Well, I discussed earlier with Todd Markham about that, but I will. One of the people that Todd asked about was Otto Whitaker, who actually had left the Roanoke area before I came there. But I had worked with Otto while I was with Hagee Middleton Neal in Greensboro. He was just a marvelous person and an expert on word orations. No, just a minute. Todd asked about Otto Whitaker. Actually, Otto had left Houck Agency a long time before I got to Roanoke. I had worked with Otto during my time at Hagee Middleton Neal in Greensboro a few years earlier. Otto was a very warm, wonderful person to work with. One of his things was he was an expert on the origin of words, and we spent a lot of time talking about that, as well as many other things.
Okay. John Will Creasy.
I knew John Will Creasy just vaguely from my time as president of the club. I knew he worked with Freddie Corstafany, and I knew them both just casually.
Okay. Claude Harrison.
I think we've already discussed Claude, haven't we?
Yeah, I think. And Frank Peru.
I think we discussed Frank.
Okay. And then there's one more question. What advertising person did you admire the most?
I'm not going to talk about that.
I'm not going to pass on that. Okay, that's all the questions.